Mason West.
Welcome into this episode of Bare Bones. As always, I am Dr. Mason West. Weird and special Friday edition. A couple of things. One, it kind of worked out. The fact that the Bears are playing on Monday Night Football, it made sense to push this episode of Bare Bones back one day. Part of the reason, one of the biggest things that we do in the show is discussion about what's going on with the injury report. And, the injury report's delayed today because delayed a couple days. And a lot of it, from the one that came out on Thursday, it's more of a generalization because they didn't actually have that practice. And if anything, the one tomorrow, the Saturday one, will be the more robust, legit one. But yeah, we still have a decent idea of what's going on today. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing the special Friday live edition of Bare Bones. In addition to that, I actually went to Lion King last night here in Chicago. So originally the plan was to have Danny and a special guest do the show yesterday, but unfortunately Danny could not make it. So we ended up working out. We're doing it today. So most of this will ultimately be the same. We're going to go through a lot of the same categories. A couple we're going to skip because it makes more sense with two people, and you get just me today. But I wanted to get some of this info out to y'all for your commutes potentially over the weekend, and maybe even if you're listening to this on Monday, you were going into work, and so you can get your Bears news. All right, first things up, chart review. A couple of things just to go over here. A little bit of a slower week. It's weird when you have Monday Night Football, things trickle out a little slower. There's not maybe quite as much. It seems so long, especially this week, right? The fact that this is a game that a lot of people are looking forward to for good and bad reasons. But the fact that you're coming off the bye, the fact that you're pushed all the way to Monday, it just seems like this game's not going to get here. But some things that did happen this week. Quarterback Caleb Williams is now a Boston Legacy FC investor. It's kind of cool, right? Now a part owner investor in a women's professional soccer team. Just doing the thing you expected him to do. You heard when he first signed his contract with the Bears as a rookie, he diversified, bought a pretty large house near the lakefront. He has his own company. He has his own, Caleb Cares, his own charity. But now he's owner of a soccer team. Just kind of cool. A couple of actual quotes to discuss here. Ben Johnson said on Facing the Commanders, "Man, you really need complementary football to beat this team. This is a really good football team. I think Dan Quinn is an outstanding coach. His guys play hard and they play inspired football. There are a lot of similarities between what we faced a couple weeks ago with the Raiders and Pete Carroll led team and a Dan Quinn led team." So a couple of things to unpack there. First off, actually switch this. Wrong mic on. Boom. That's probably better sound quality. Anyway, first off, this is a good football team. It's going into the year was one of the oldest team in terms of not just the team as a whole, but also their starters. So when you have that, there's a lot of obviously veteran leadership, which is important, but you don't have that youth. You need effort, and Dan Quinn has brought that to this team. Dan Quinn is an outstanding coach. People kind of forget that. They forget that, his Falcons team hit it to the Super Bowl and really should have won it. That crazy 28-3 game that against the Patriots. There a breakdown on the defensive side, a bit of a breakdown as well on the offensive side, and all of that ultimately leading to that loss. But and then he had some bad hires at offensive coordinator. That one of the reasons why he couldn't replace Kyle Shanahan. Ultimately, could not keep that Falcons team going, and one of the reasons he was ultimately released. And then you go to his time with Dallas. I mean, that Dallas defense has not been the same since he left. And people also tend to forget Dan Quinn was a finalist for that Bears job along with Matt Eberflus. And a bit crazy at the end of the day that Eberflus got that job. I mean, and that's not even necessarily hindsight. At the time, we found out too, ultimately part of the decision making into hiring Eberflus over Dan Quinn came to representation. Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles, all under that same agency. We know that was a big part of it. Ultimately, and Dan Quinn ended up getting the Commander's job. which is great. And you saw the success, right? The fact that not only with a rookie quarterback were they able to flip that team around very quickly. New ownership group helped as well, of course. Also, new GM at the helm, but and not just make the playoffs, but winning that first round, beating the Lions. We'll talk about that a little bit later today, and not just beating the Lions, but helping release Ben Johnson a little sooner to the market so the Bears could hire him. Also, as a reminder, the Commanders wanted to hire Ben Johnson. But then Ben ultimately decided, I believe the story goes, was flying there, ultimately decided to turn around, go back to Detroit, one last hurrah, and they almost had to pivot to Dan Quinn. But back to the quote itself, this is going to be a hard-fought game. This is not just like that Raiders game was. Yes, the Raiders game for the Bears was gross from a couple of perspectives, whether it's the lack of offensive consistency early on, whether it was an inability to control Max Crosby, which is hard to control Max Crosby as a whole. But this is going to be a high-effort team. You see that if you watch the film for the Commanders the last couple of weeks, just like you saw that for the Raiders. And so it's going to be a hard game. Ben Johnson also said on his role in improving the Bears' ground attack. It's hard to evaluate any of our backs right now. When you turn on the tape and there are some free runners in the hole where the play is designed to go. I take it personally because I actually spend more time on the run game than I do in the passing game. Not only trying to create explosives in the running game, but being sound. So a couple things to unpack there. First of all, I think it's a little bit of a kind statement by Ben. While it's harder to evaluate the running game with where the line has been, there's a reason why Braxton Jones was benched in that last game. He was pulled because he could not obviously get to the second level. I mean, that's a huge problem. But even sometimes, just first level blocks weren't correct. Just blocking down on a defensive lineman when there was someone sitting, right in his face to the left of him. But then also, yes, there would be times where there's supposed to be a double team and he's supposed to work up to the second line. And whether it was due to a little bit of the ankle, whether it was due to not understanding the play at hand, there's a combination of things, but he didn't often get to that second level. And it is hard as a running back when to hit the hole or to before you even hit it where you're getting contact. And that did happen a couple of times. Now, I said it was a bit kind because if you do look at the stats, rushing yards over expected, things of that, and you just watch the film, I mean, there are holes being missed too. There's opportunities, there's yards being left on the field by the running game. DeAndre Swift is not known as a runner between the tackles. Kyle Monangai, he's had some flashes, which I've enjoyed, but, you can go back to that one play where he fights too hard to try to get extra yards a couple weeks ago and ends up, losing yards on the second, third, fourth effort. So it's not as simple and clean as the line it being a problem. Now, compared to last year, I mean, the line is still better. The scheme is way better. So you do have to take the running backs in consideration. The last thing there to kind of parse out that I think is interesting is how he spends more time in the run game than the pass game. I think that's interesting and cool for a couple of reasons. One, the fact that the passing game is as explosive as it can be, as dynamic as it can be, and as creative as it can be, with, in theory, less effort, which is hard, which is fun, I think, as a Bears fan, because over the years, the Bears have had not great passing attacks. It's a bit disappointing at the same time, because if he is spending this much time on the run game, you would hope to see a bit more out of it, and a bit more is being kind on my end. It has not been good. So, you do have the question for Ben. Ultimately, how is he going to turn this around, right? Is there an instance where in Detroit, obviously he was the brainchild of the offense as a whole, but, how much of it was some of the other staff by chance, throwing their hats in the ring, their knowledge for the run game. A lot of times in offenses, the offensive line coach, so in this case, it's in Detroit, it's Hank Fraley, who we know the Bears were trying to hire, but they just couldn't get to their off, because he ended up getting, because he's a run game coordinator and offensive line coach with the Lions, so he ended up staying there. Is this something that ultimately Ben can turn around himself, right? Can he do some of the natural, it seems, affinity of the pass game, and can he channel that into the design of the run game? And can the Bears offensive line coach, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he's a part of that. Can he help with the scheme, not just the scheme, but the technique that's needed as well. So it's something to keep an eye on going forward, because if it is a line problem, as Ben's kind of alluding to, with Braxton benched at this point, and you have a rookie and, an undrafted free agent who was a rookie last year in there, that all matters, but you should see an improvement coming up. And especially at a team like this, the Commanders, they're not slouches in the run game, but they're not stellar either. Same thing on the defensive line for them, excuse me. The defensive linemen don't penetrate quite as much as you'd like to see them. They don't have a dude like the Raiders did. Von Miller's there, but he's a shadow of his former self. Again, it's a lot of effort. Dorrance Armstrong, I believe, is their sack leader. I have that a little bit later for a point, but just another interesting thing. Last thing that we're going to talk about in this chart review, some of the trade talk that has been going around the Bears universe. So the two main positions, and this is no secret to anybody, but edge and running back are areas of need right now for the Bears. We just talked about running back and why that's the case. Edge is another one. I mean, Brian Burns on the Giants has more sacks than the Bears' entire, unit does. So it's no secret. So a couple names that have popped up. First one, Trey Hendrickson. The Bengals are not doing well. They're still trying, right? They just traded for Joe Flacco. This next week might be tough playing the Packers, but they actually have a relatively favorable or doable schedule if you just can have a competent quarterback in there. Their offensive line still is horrendous, so I don't know how Joe will manage that, but I do think it'll be better than Browning. Two of the games that they have coming up in the next 5 games is going to be against the Steelers, who are actually in first, and the Bengals are in second. They're 2 and 3. So if, for the sake of argument, they even split, if not sweep the Steelers, if they get a couple more wins, steal a couple wins here and there, then a Trey Hendrickson trade is less likely. He recently restructured his contract to earn $30 million for 2025 this season. The adjustment followed a prolonged contract dispute, as people know, culminating in a $14 million raise for the upcoming season. So the Bengals still are all in. They paid for Joe Burrow. They paid Jamar Chase. They paid T. Higgins. They've tried to fix this offensive line-ish. I mean, they've tried. The effort was there. It just it's not good. And they've kind of ignored the defense. We know the defense is not good. And Trey is the only piece on that defense. So again, if they can stack a couple wins here, they wouldn't move Trey. But if they fall to a point where even if Joe Burrow can return in December, it's looking like, it's a lost cause, then yes, Trey might get moved. The other name popping up is Jeffrey Simmons of the Tennessee Titans. Defensive tackle, signed 4-year, $94 million contract extension in April 2023. This includes a $66 million guarantees and $24 million signing bonus. This extension would kept him under contract through 2027. It's a very team-friendly deal, which is both good and bad. So it makes it easier to absorb than potentially some other deals that are out there. But at the same time, because it's team-friendly, you're going to have to pay for that. Some recent trades that have gone through. The LA Rams traded and this is just in general defense. We know the Micah Parsons one. I mean, that's a tough one to compare to, just because of the negativity that was there between Dallas and Micah, along with his standing. I mean, just as a top 3 pass rusher in terms of how much they got for him, but it seemed relatively cheap. Defensively, the LA Rams traded 2 first-round picks, and a 4th-round pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars for defensive end for cornerback Jalen Ramsey in 2019. And that just as another comparison point. So it would be expensive. The other thing is that you have to absorb Simmons' substantial contract. So while it's team-friendly, it still is a healthy chunk of change. So that includes a base salary of $17.5 million in 2025, and that escalates in subsequent years. So you have to match that salary. One of the ways you would do it probably is DJ Moore. You have to look at areas that wouldn't weaken the Bears. So wide receiver is probably one of the few with the emergence of Rome Odunze, with who you're hoping for continued emergence of Luther Burden and Colson Loveland, just some general pass catchers for you. And, like I said, the money has to match. It has to also be something that would make sense for Tennessee. So people probably want to throw Montez Sweat as a name out there. Hey, he's not lived up to that contract he received, the compensation, giving up a second for him. Let's move on from him. But
why would the Titans do that? The contracts are a bit different there, so that might be a reason, but you would be potentially more likely to say DJ Moore because you're giving Cam Ward, your shiny new quarterback, a receiver, hopefully to help him along the way. I mean, that was the idea to bring DJ here previously, right, as a part of that trade to help Justin along the way, and then ultimately Caleb. So you have to match, right? So that'll be the tough part. Plus, you do have you're going to give draft picks. I don't think it'd be necessarily the same maybe amount as what Jalen Ramsey went for, or even what Micah did, but it's probably going to be at least a first. Lastly, running back. Sorry, Breece Hall is the name that's floating around the most, just because the Jets are terrible. They haven't won a game yet, and overall, it'd be he's had some comments, right? He says that he hasn't had an opportunity to show what he can do in this league, and he'd like that opportunity. That's pretty much a trade me flag. And the Jets are in rebuild mode. So his contract's pretty palatable. He has a total contract value $9,014,774. Cap hit of a little over $4 million. So very easy to absorb there. It's the last year of his deal, so you would need to work out a long-term deal, which should lower, hopefully, the price that would cost. Just a couple of examples. If you want to go upper end of that spectrum, Christian McCaffrey trade, the 49ers got McCaffrey from the Panthers for a second, third, and fourth round pick in 2023, plus a fifth round pick in 2024. The Commanders this year sent Brian Robinson to the 49ers, and the Jaguars trading Tank Bigsby to the Eagles in August and September 2025, respectively. The 49ers acquired Robinson for a 2026 sixth round pick to add depth behind Christian McCaffrey, while the Eagles acquired Bigsby from the Jaguars for a 2026 fifth and sixth round swap. So, and Breece likely goes for, I can see him going for a fourth, so that would be much more palatable from a draft pick, but also in terms of you could just monetarily make that work very easily. So we'll see, though. The Bears have consistently, it seems like, shown for the most part they're happy with the running back room. I mean, it's no secret they were trying to draft a running back this last draft. They got sniped for TreVeyon Henderson. They got sniped for Cam Skattebo. We're coming off the awakening of Cam Skattebo, 21 touch, I think it was 110-yard, 3-touchdown performance, and just being a wild man during the game and after the game. And it just never really lined up during the draft, and they clearly want to improve it to an extent. I mean, they brought in Common Nine Guy. But you also haven't been doing a lot on the other anyway else, right? There's been players available that were cut on practice squads. Roschon Johnson's been active, but he just hasn't played besides special teams. So they haven't really been showing, man, we feel we really need to shake this up. So we'll see is the long way to put it, or is the short way to put it, excuse me. But if you're going to do something, a pick, getting Breece, and and then in that case, you're hoping you can work out a deal that's team friendly, would be the most likely scenario if they were going to try to hit the running backs and improve that position. All right, training room roundup. So, gotta pull up the actual picture. Okay, training room roundup. Very different, actually. I was expecting to come on here and have a very dire conversation potentially, just because of what it looked like on Thursday. There's like a lot. It's very long and a lot of DNPs, but it's actually a bit better. So the only person who did not participate for 2 straight days here was Gary Jarrett with that knee. It has very quickly moved from we're just managing this to is that knee just gone. And when I say that, we're not talking like some hidden ligament issue or something like that. But, when you're Grady's age, when you had a previous ACL injury, the way that he did, rehabbing from that's tougher. And at the end of the day, then you're dealing with things like potentially, patellar tendon pain, you're dealing with quad tendon pain, you're dealing with potential meniscus issues, inflammation. Is the quad concentric production enough? Is the hamstring eccentric production enough to control that tibia? and he needs to generate power, right? As a defensive lineman, you need power, and then he has to be able to make those small change of directions with a stable knee. And clearly, that has not been the case. The fact that he's coming off of a bye and can't go is not great for him. So I would not expect him to be a go in this game. Some of the limited ones. So we have Kyler Gordon, Colson Loveland, Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright went from DNP to limited, so he has a shot to play on Monday. We'll see what the Saturday injury report holds. But the fact that he missed as much time as he did, I think speaks to two things. One, the Bears had some comfort throwing Benedict out there at right tackle, and at the same time, that right elbow was something happened there. Something funky. They didn't really release exactly what went on, but you could be looking at things like in terms of the fact that he's back too, so that rules out some crazy stuff. But you could have had a dislocation there. You could have had a grade 1 or 2 tear of like the extensor carpi group, radialis or longus or brevis, that he's been rehabbing back. Just a couple examples of things. But clearly there wasn't a break, there wasn't a full out rupture, things of that nature. So he has a chance. The other ones, Kyler Gordon is playing. I can say that for fact. Colson Loveland is playing, which are great. Austin and the other ones, some full participants. So you were worried about Jaquan Brisker. He was a DNP. He was a full. I never was worried about him. I don't think you should be. It was just something that I think that popped up over the bye. Something that acted. He played out the Raiders game, was fine, and they were like, "Ooh, this is still there. Let's give you the day." And it was awesome. Austin Booker should be back. Now, this is how much is he? Is he just a little spark, or is it a massive jump? And I say that because, he led the league in sacks during the preseason. Now it's preseason, so take that with a grain of salt. But the Bears need something, man. Look at their set. Again, I have a stat later that we'll dive into this, but it has not been good for the Bears pass rush. And at this point, anything is a massive improvement. TJ Edwards will be back from that hamstring. Travis Homer, he will also be back. Now, he's never been a stalwart at the running position, but it gives you an option, and especially on third down, that's someone you could throw out there potentially. And that was a bit scary for a little bit too, because Kamanungai was a DNP also with a thigh issue, but he was full, should be fine, good to go. But can Homer sneak into the rotation a little bit, since it seems like the Bears are just refuse to want to put Roschon in there, and because you need a little something in this run game. Jonah Jackson, that was just management. He was full. And then the one that was kind of interesting was Cairo. That was kind of out of nowhere. He had a right thigh injury, but he's been full the last couple of games, practice, Obviously for kicker, it's a little different, fully participating in practice versus some of the other positions. But I do want to take a moment to have a conversation about Cairo Santos. So Cairo has 23 career 50-yard field goals. He does not have the strongest leg. This is not a secret to anybody. I think anyone listening live right now or listening on the podcast, there's plenty of individuals who have called for him to lose his job for that reason, because he doesn't have the strongest leg in the world, and that's a problem. I do want to highlight, though, he connected from 52 and 51 yards against the Raiders during a 4 field goal performance. In 89 career games with the Bears, Cairo's 50-plus field goal total has tied Robbie Gould's franchise record. And Santos has connected on 74.2% of his attempts from 50 yards or longer. If Cairo wouldn't have been able to go, you now have Jake Moody up, because he was signed to the Bears practice squad after the 49ers cut him. His career accuracy is 74.2% from any range and 50% from 50 yards or longer. So I think it's a little bit of careful what you wish for when it comes to the Cairo situation. Would I like someone that can be, especially with what's going on? You look at what Aubrey's doing out in Dallas, what he can do. He can kick it like almost as soon as he walks in the locker room kind of thing. But the fact that, Jake is a 50% from 50. And again, like I said, Cairo is 74.2, and Jake's overall accuracy, 74.2, and that's including extra points. That's been funky for him. You just don't want to enter the kicking carousel again. Do people remember Casey Bednarski getting kicks for the Bears in that that kicking carousel that went on? That was the Eddie Pinheiro summer where they traded for Eddie, but also he's not here. He's now kicking for another team. So you could say what you want about that. Cairo stabilized the position. Now, it's been a couple years, so as any player ages, you have to reassess and see what's going on there. But just take a breath is what I'm saying. Would you like that position solidified? Yes. Is week 6, middle of the year, the time to do it? Probably not. All right, moving on to the Commanders. Commanders, for the most part, there's some interesting things in there. They have not released their Friday one yet, which is crazy. It's 5:30. Get your stuff out there. So really, we're just going to be reacting to Thursdays. I'll probably end up tweeting something out tomorrow as stuff comes out more. But a couple guys limited. John Bates, Noah Brown, they should go. Sam Cosmi, that's a big one for them. Being back in their lineup as a full participant is huge. Shaden was also full. Here we go. Okay, so you're not going to see it on the screen if you're watching live, but I was able to pull up their injury report. They updated it on their website, just not with the Bears one. So I'll get to that. I'll in a second. Okay, here we go. So Jaden was full again. Cosmi's full again. Like I said, great. Bates is full now. The two to highlight. Deebo Samuel, who did not participate previously. It was a weird rest-heal combo. He was limited today. I would expect him to be limited tomorrow, probably, if not full, and for him to play. So expect Deebo Samuel. Chris Rodriguez and Terry McLaurin both did not participate. Terry's not playing. If he played, I would be blown away. It'd be crazy. But, they've been able to survive with just Deebo. Now, the Jaden Daniels conversation of it all. By the way, Friday's injury report for them was an estimated one based on a walkthrough. So take this with a grain of salt. The Jaden Daniels conversation, I don't think he should have played last week. I know they won. He played well, but you could just tell in the videos that they did have before the game, when I went back and was able to watch the game afterwards, you could just tell that knee was not right. And I don't think, I'm not saying it's going to be this week. I'm not saying it's even going to be next week, but there's something going on right now with that knee that he's not 100%. Now, what football player is, but it shouldn't be, in my opinion, as obvious that he's a bit hampered as it is, especially when his game is so important in his ability to scramble. I mean, not just that he's a scrambler, he is an elite scrambler. And that's interesting, evading the pass rush. One thing he could be better at is evading and then looking downfield for throws. I think usually if he's scrambling, he is scrambling to get downfield. But with this knee now, right, I don't think he's doing that quite as much. You see that in the stats. But if you take away that superpower of being an elite scrambler, whether that's by choice to try to not have the knee be aggravated or re-injured, or if it's by necessity because he can't, that's a huge issue. So keep an eye on that. Just maybe not this week, maybe not next week, but if he ended up popping up on the injury report again the next couple of weeks, that wouldn't surprise me. All right, we have a brief break here, and then we're going to get back to some of the rest of our categories.
Proper gut health is instrumental to athletic performance and recovery. Our gut is in essence a second brain, and health researchers are continually uncovering new benefits of probiotics, scientifically connecting the dots between gut health, reduced inflammation, and stronger immunity. Kombucha is a tasty, clean label, functional option to easily add probiotics into any athlete's routine. We call it balancing your brains.
Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Made from organic teas and infused with natural electrolytes, kombucha offers a delicious and effective solution to maintain peak performance. Better athletic performance, increased nutrient absorption, improved wellness, and improved cognitive stamina. Use code BEARGUTCHECK, BEARGUTCHECK, for 15% off your order. All right. Knee-jerk reaction. My knee-jerk reaction, so one hot take going into this week, is that the Bears pass catchers have a chance to eat this week, particularly the rookies Burden and Loveland. Through week 5, Commanders rank right in the middle at 16th in terms of defensive EPA per dropback, 0.12. So that part, right, you can get them, right? They haven't been terrible. They haven't been great. But the part that I find interesting is they play a lot of zone cover 3 at 26%, but also play man cover 1 at a 27% clip. Now, one of the things that people have pointed to that have dampened, not negated, but dampened passing in the last couple of years is the increase in cover 2. That's also changed the kind of, in my opinion, receivers that have really been able to take over the league of recent years. I mean, if you look at the guys right now who are top in the league and, EPA per play and their DVOA and all those advanced stats, and even some of the traditional ones, like top 5 in receiving yards, you got guys like Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith, the Jigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, even Emeka Egbuka, excuse me. All these guys who are willing to play out slot have been increasing a bit and playing more outside, but are willing to go over the middle, and that's important just because of what cover 2 does. But back to this, the Commanders do, again, they play a lot of man, 27% cover 1, just that one specifically. And that means that there's a chance for runaway routes. If you're not able to press, if you're not able to jam at the line, if you're not able to keep up with these pass catchers, it'll be a problem. So I think that's going to open up things specifically for all the pass catchers. I mean, DJ Moore can do that. Rome is getting better at that. Olamide Zaccheaus is fantastic at that. But I highlighted Loveland and Burden specifically just because they are tough matchups. I mean, Burden is a fast, quick guy who is great at those runaway routes. And Colson Loveland can be a matchup nightmare. That's at least what we're hoping for. I mean, we saw that at Michigan. We have not seen that yet at the NFL level. Right now Tyler Warren is getting all of the flowers, justly so. Tyler Warren's doing some really fun stuff over there in Indianapolis. Don't get me wrong, but it is very different situations. That's a whole other thing too. The crowning of Warren and the worry of Loveland is too early at this point. Just for that's for another day, but. I think in this game, 12 personnel should be very important. And part of that is the matchups you get. So if you play 12 personnel, how do the Commanders match with you? Let's say it's in base, which they actually do a surprising amount of. Frankie Louvu really is a great linebacker, solid linebacker. But Bobby Wagner just cannot cover anymore. He has to play downhill. So if you're going to roll out with both of those guys, as your primary linebackers, who are they covering? So you have one on Cole Kmet, you have one on Loveland. One would imagine you're going to put Frankie Louvu on Loveland. But if you can create with motion and mismatches, can you get Loveland on Bobby Wagner? Even if you have Bobby Wagner on Cole Kmet, Cole had a really rough week in against the Raiders in week 4. So it could be a week that he gets some redemption. But that was from hit that drop pass from what was looking like a touchdown drive. He had a ton of penalties. So one would expect he's looking for some redemption in there. And then you could also have for the Commanders Mike Sanderstill. That he's their primary nickel cornerback. He has played 192 snaps in the slot through week 5, leading into week 6 here. So he's a solid nickel, but it just depends on how they want to match everything. So if you decide you want to put Sanderstill on Loveland for the sake of argument, now all of a sudden your other slot receivers, can you get Burden on, Burden in motion? You got him out of the slot. Zaccheaus, like I mentioned, that would be another example there. And just the chess match of moving these guys around. So I do think there's a really good chance of moving the ball through the air. To be perfectly honest, something just brutally honest, this isn't surprising to anybody, but this pass rush sucks. Through 4 games, the Bears are 32nd in QB pressure percent, 31st in average time to pressure at 2.97 seconds, 31st in rushing yards before contacts per attempt at 2.24. 2.24 yards before you get touched as a running back. Wild. 29th in PFF run defense grade and 22nd in pass rush grade. All that is bad. Just terrible. Ugh, God. Okay, and then I'll get to later a bit of a conversation about. Oh no, that's on the run game. So in terms of the pass rush, you're hoping Austin Booker gives you a little something here, but all the other improvement at this point, unless you do make a trade for a Jeffrey Simmons type, it's got to be from within. It's an effort thing. I mean, you're in also. I think bringing Austin Booker in will help even indirectly the other guys. Like if you look at Montez Sweat and you look at Dion Dangbo, they're two very similar players in terms of just who they are. They're built. They're larger individuals. They're not going to beat you with speed. They're going to play that speed to power game. But if you can bring in Austin Booker in, who's more of a speed guy, he's smaller. He doesn't fit the traditional Dennis Allen role, right? Can you get a little more quicker penetration on the one side that even draws attention, right? That draws attention away from some of your interior guys, so that Gervon Dexter can get upfield, so that some of your other guys, so that if there is help, that you might send it the other way. I don't think it's gonna be a game changer, but I mean you can't be 32nd, 31st, 29th, etc. in these categories. You have to get higher. So Dante, how you doing? Good to see you in the chat. Well, ain't this humorous? Something quirky or funny. According to friend of the podcast, Quentin Crisco at Bucket Stats. By the way, if you're not following him, you absolutely should be. He does fantastic stuff. I love his post Bears game reviews. He does it on Tap Sports. He breaks down the film. In a world where there's not a lot of good offensive line knowledge out there, what he does along with his podcast co-hosts is one of the best out there, besides guys like Brandon Thorne. So go ahead, follow him at Bucket Stats. But he had tweeted out this earlier this week. Bears defensive rankings by down through week 5. First down, EPA per play, 32nd. Success rate, 32nd. 32nd. I just wanted to pause to let that sink in for a second there. That's not good. Second down, EPA per play, 21st. Success rate, 27th. Third down, EPA per play, 1st. Success rate, 2nd. What? So it makes sense to an extent. Him and I had a little conversation about this, because Dennis Allen is all about, can we get you to disadvantageous third downs and get after you? And third down is your money down. If you can get off the field on third down, fantastic. That's exactly what you're looking for. And you're not necessarily expecting them to do a massive jump, but if you can get from 32nd in the league to 25th, 22nd, something in that area, now all of a sudden you are in a little more of an advantaged position on second down, on third down, and just making it so that's a little tougher. And I think a big part of that, because I had originally asked him, was that just the run game? We know the Bears' run defense has not been very good. And then he highlighted a stat where it was with the pass and the run. But if you could stop at least one of them, if a team just feels like, all right, we can't just run the ball on you and get 6 yards on first down, that will go a long way. Now, how do you do that? That's a whole other conversation, which we'll get to later. All right, another break here, and then we're going to be back. We have merch. So I am not wearing any of it today, actually. This is from the hats from Dragon's Milk. It's actually really cool. If you guys haven't, no one's been there, there's a couple locations that they have, but up in Holland, Michigan, and even in Grand Rapids, it's really cool. They make their own bourbons and stuff as well. And this is from the Lion King. So I'm not wearing our merch today. I'm a bad plugger, but I was feeling cold, and I like my little lion ears. I feel very, very cool in these. So I wanted to wear that today. But our merch is also very cool, even if I don't have it on. So I'm going to throw up on the screen, boop, QR code. So if you're watching live right now, scan the QR code. It'll bring you right to the merch shop. If you're listening, I'll go ahead over to the show at about 39 minutes or so, is what I'm seeing. This is where I threw up the code, so you can go. It'll bring you directly there. Otherwise, you can go to second-city-gridiron-shop.fourthwall.com to snag some of your Second City Gridiron gear. It really helps us out because, one, it makes it so we can do more for you. Like, we'd like to do more live shows. We'd like to do, especially around the draft. I mean, Danny and I did that a couple of years ago. It was very fun. We got to meet a bunch of you as listeners. It will let us do more giveaways and just to be a part more so of this Bears community. So go ahead. And also just rep the shows. The more that you wear a shirt, wear a hat, drink from a mug, get a beer glass, it doesn't matter what's on there, with some of our stuff on there, people hear about us. On that note, if you can, I hate doing this, but subscribe, comments. It helps us in the algorithm so more Bears fans can find us. Thank you. And that was the end of my shameless plug. What you need to know. The Bears Commanders matchup has been played 54 times, 7 postseason games, with the Bears winning 25 games and the Commanders winning 28 games. They've also tied one time. The last matchup was last year, where both offenses really struggled, but the Commanders pulled off an 18-15 win off the Fail Mary. This is the 4th game out of 5 years played at Washington. Fun little quirk there. I'm not sure why that's the case. You'd have to ask the NFL schedule makers, but playing 4 out of 5 games in Washington is odd to me. It's very slanted. A couple other stats just about this matchup. Monday night, 8:15. The first part of the doubleheader that'll be happening Monday night. Bears have allowed the 8th most rushing yards, 23.3 yards 200 per game, and the most rushing yards, 140.8 yards per game to running backs. Bears are allowed 2nd most receiving touchdowns, 3 to running backs. The Bears have allowed the 6th most targets, 8.25 per game, and the 2nd most receptions, 7.25 to tight ends. The Bears have allowed the 4th most passing touchdowns, 10 to quarterbacks, and the Bears has the 2nd most interceptions, 7. So there's a little silver lining for you. The Commanders on the other end have allowed the 7th most rushing yards, or attempts, at 23.4 yards per game, carries per game to running backs. Commanders have allowed the 7th most reception yards to tight ends at 65.4. And going back to my Colson Loveling little thing over there, the Commanders have allowed the 9th most passing yards, 254.4 per game to quarterbacks. The Commanders has the 4th most sacks at 3 per game. Ugh. And the Commanders allowed the 9th most rushing yards, 28.8 to quarterbacks. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup, as you can tell. Hey, Snoop Von Poop in the chat. Happy Friday, my guy. Happy Friday to you, Snoop. Thank you so much for popping in. Glad you're here. Also, glad that you're enjoying the merch. I appreciate you wearing it on all the shows that you're wearing it on. Snoop got his hat. I mean, he wanted a giveaway, but he got his hat and he's loving it. So you guys should too. Couple questions I was going to ask Danny, whoever was going to be here, but we're solo, so we're just going to talk about it. Going to think out loud here. So the Bears are allowing 164.5 rushing yards per game. The Washington Commanders are averaging 156 rushing yards per game. This seems like a recipe for disaster. What can the Bears do to flip the script? I think at the end of the day, it's about second level stuff. It's about first level, your interior defenders taking on double teams and their blocks, being a little more staunch at the point of attack. But then also it's about team tackling in space, just emphasizing the need for technique improvement in terms of shedding blocks. So the opposite of what we talked about earlier with the Bears and what Braxton wasn't doing, getting to the second level. Same thing for the Bears linebackers and safeties and nickels. Can you shed blocks and get into the hole? They just have not been able to do that. I think the return of Gordon and Edwards will be good. I think the return of Gordon is probably more important. And I say that not actually as even a diss to TJ Edwards. I think, he's kind of Mr. Right. He's usually in the right place, even if he's lost a half step or so. But what's important is more so, Noah Sewell was actually decent. Was he like all otherworldly? No. But he did his job and he did it fairly well versus what was happening at that nickel position. I had a stat last week. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was basically like, you were allowing over 100 passer rating at the nickel position. You just can't do that. So, and again, emphasizing tackling technique, block shedding from your second, third level guys is going to be you got to meet these guys in the hole. The second question I was going to have was, does Deebo Samuel scare you? My answer was going to be no. He doesn't scare me. Jokingly, I've called him Fat Deebo because he is a little on the chunkier side. He's on the older side. It's hard to stay in shape when he's as hurt as he is. He needed a day off for rest and a little bit of heal, but rest. This year, he has 30 catches on 38 targets, 300 yards receiving, and 3 touchdowns. So that's nothing to scoff at. And you add in the 46 yards rushing and a touchdown there, so he's got 4 touchdowns right now for the Commanders. That's good. That is good. And he also ranks 7th in terms of cushion given by opposing teams. So teams still are. I think it's a combination. 1, teams are still wary of his speed, but also 2, the way they use and move him, it just creates space even before true separation is created on the actual route. So, does he scare me? No. Is it someone you have to still circle, and identify and control? Yes. But there's a difference. Like I'd be more scared of him if Terry was out there because of the combination of the two. Just there's other guys out there, right? The Bears this year, they played Justin Jefferson. That guy scares me. They're going to be playing Jamar Chase. That guy scares me. I would have said Derrick Henry, but my fantasy team knows right now he's not very scary, and that's awful. But so yeah, I would say no. Worried, concerned, but not scared. Last one. The Bears have 40 penalties this year, including 6 that were declined. 26 of those interactions have been committed by the offense, including 11 pre-snap fouls. Referee Alex Moore and his crew will work the Bears-Commanders game this Monday. Moore is in his first season as referee after spending 3 years as an umpire. Moore's crew leads the NFL in penalties through 5 weeks. 95 penalties total, with another 22 ultimately that were dismissed. So my question was, do the Bears have a chance to stay ahead of the sticks? I will say no, with the thought of, I'm concerned. Darnell Wright, a couple of his penalties he's had were ridiculous. There's a couple blocks he had that were called holds. They were not holds. It's silly. But at the same time, you still have to manage the ones that are holds, that are accurate. And I think, having the elbow injury doesn't help you there. Coming out of the bye, you'd imagine some of the pre-snap ones are more cleaned up. So you're hoping that, like, there was one, I believe, in the Raiders game where Rowan went into motion and he started running up field, so he had an illegal shift. You're hoping that's cleaned up. But at the same time, if you have a crew that is actively looking for certain things, and, like I said, his first season as a referee, you might be just a little flag happy. I think it's going to be very hard to stay ahead of the sticks in that way. So I unfortunately think that this will still be a heavily penalized game for the Bears. All right, love it, hate it, rehabilitate it. This is something that I love in terms of matchup, dynamic for the Bears, one that I hate, and one that, if I were the coach, something I would focus on. Love, Ben Johnson offense versus Dan Quinn defense. Yes, this is not, I think I've done this little monologue before, but this is not the Lions, even though I'm a Lion today. Jared Goff is not in at quarterback in terms of his high completion percentage and efficiencies. Amon-Ra St. Brown is not a pass catcher. The Lions offensive line's not walking through that door, and nor is their tandem of excellent running backs. However, the brain that engineered 521 yards in the 45-31 division round playoff loss to the Commanders last winter is here. Detroit outgained Washington by 40 yards and held a 30-27 advantage in terms of first downs, but they still lost. That was largely because of 5 turnovers, which the Bears have been pretty good at avoiding. So I know I guess I just gave Jared Goff his flowers there, but he was a part of that, and so was the rest of that Lions team. In addition to that, I just read off that score of 45-31. The defense allowed 45 points. Now, the Bears defense has not been great by any means, but I think they can avoid giving up 45 against this Commanders team. So I'm confident in Ben Johnson being able to scheme up against Dan Quinn. The question ends up being, can the players avoid turnovers and can they execute? And I would say yes, that I believe that they can, based off what we've seen in the first 4 weeks of them playing. Hate. Bears pass rush versus the Commanders offensive line. No way to sugarcoat this. Who is leading the Bears in sacks? I'm going to pause here just in case anyone wanted to try to throw a name out into the chat. Who is leading the Bears in sacks? It's a 5-way tie with one. Montez Sweat, Dio Dangbo, Javon Dexter, Dominic Robinson, and Tano Paskanen. I butchered that. I'm sorry, Tano, but I tried. They all have one. And that goes back to what we talked about when we talked about the whole Austin Booker thing. Can he just be a spark where, whether it's him specifically getting more pressures, more quarterback hits, more sacks, or if because of what he brings, attention is shifted in a way, or maybe that allows different stunts, different games to be used because of the speed he does have instead of some of the larger, I'll say lumbering, it sounds bad, but lumbering, ends that you have. Does that allow for more pressure and more sacks? You have. In addition to that, the Washington Commanders are tied for 18th with 11 sacks allowed, but 4 of those sacks were the Packers. And we know what Michael Parsons can do just in terms of creating opportunities for others, even if he isn't getting sacks. And 3 were the Giants, and the Giants' defensive line is just fantastic. So I am concerned ultimately about the Bears being able to generate a pass rush and letting Jaden just sit back there and not test his knee. I need them to test his knee. Last category, rehabilitate. I mean, it has to be the run game, right? I mean, the Bears are averaging 102.3 rushing yards per game. Part of that was the O-line. Braxton was benched due to his inability to get to the second level in week 4, but the running backs have not been helping. DeAndre Swift has totaled just 187 yards through 4 games, 3.3 yards per carry average, coming in below what was his previous career worst at 3.8 yards per carry from last season when he was with the Eagles. From last season, the one after the Eagles. He ranks 9th worst in terms of rushing yards over expected per attempt. Better than last year, but still not good, with negative 0.39. So on average, every time he touches the ball, he is 0.39 yards below what it should be. Now, that's helped out with some explosive plays. He does have those every once in a while in the run game, but it's the down-to-down ones that are killing you. I would expect them to do something different with this run game, whether that's Monangai getting more carries, whether it's just throwing Travis Homer in there. Something is going to be different. I'm not sure what they will decide to do, because some of the things that I thought were fairly obvious, they have not done. Like Roshan Johnson apparently just doesn't exist except to make tackles on special teams. So we'll see. One bonus one, because I thought of this and I think it's really important. Pass catchers on scramble drills. It's not what you'd want it to be. It's pretty. You learned this in middle school. If you're running a deep route, come back. If you're running a shorter route, go deep. If you're in, go out. If you're out, go in. There's all these different different teams have different ones. But for the first 4 weeks of the Bears playing, you saw that a lot of times Caleb expected receivers, tight ends to be in a different position than they were on the scramble drill. Some of that's on Caleb to an extent too. Like the one interception that he had in week 3 along the sideline where he just kind of chucked it up. That was not a good throw. But then there's a couple times, like for example, in the Raiders game, he expected Cole to come down the stem a bit more, down the sideline towards him, and Cole didn't. And so Caleb couldn't get him the ball. And there's a couple examples of that. So I'm hoping over this bye week that was something that was discussed, because the opportunities are there and Caleb is going to give you a chance. But the receivers, the pass catchers as a whole, just have to be in the areas they should be. X factor for the Commanders: establish the run. The Bears team is not good at defending the run, and the Commanders have been pretty solid at it. I mean, obviously, Jaden brings an elite and dangerous run element to the offense. In 3 weeks, he had 124 rushing yards. That was, leaving a little early in a game. But, Big Bill Krosky-Merritt is no slouch. They felt good enough about him that they traded away Brian Robinson, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. He is averaging 6.6 yards per carry and has 4 touchdowns. He ranks first in the NFL in rushing yards over expected per attempt with 2.17. So 4 yards are blocked, he's getting 6. 6 yards are blocked, he's getting 8, et cetera, et cetera. That's fantastic. That's what you were hoping for as a Bears fan to have. But, but the Big Bill's doing it. So if they can churn on the ground and not just have to rely on Debo as their main receiver. Zach Ertz didn't have a catch, I believe, last week, which is odd because that's the first time he hasn't had a catch in a week since like 2017 or something crazy like that. X factor for the Bears: create turnovers. They have 9 on the year, which is 3rd most, and that is with them being off last week. First was actually Jacksonville with 14, and the second is the Steelers with 10. So you're actually not too far off the number 2 spot. So they have to keep eating, right? Creating those short fields. We saw against the Raiders how necessary that was, because if the Bears hadn't had the short fields, they probably wouldn't have gotten as many even field goals as they did, and that's a very different Raiders game. So I think the defense still has to be opportunistic in this game. We will not do over-unders because that's just silly for me to just pick an over-under and then say it myself since I made most of these up. But what we will do is the Bear gut check. This is where I use my gut feelings, revitalized by Kombucha, of course. Go get your Kombucha. Code Bear Gut Check, 15% off, to give our game predictions against the Lime. So, Monday Night Football, Bears at Commanders. When I grabbed these, Commanders were minus 4.5. I'm going to take the Bears. I think that, first of all, the line was too big when it first opened at like 5.5. I get why. The Bears were coming off that Raiders game, which didn't look great, just because it was a sloppy game. But at the end of the day, I think if you watch the game, which, don't do again, don't rewatch. I had to rewatch it like 2-3 times. I don't do what I did. You saw there was, the Raiders were not a slouch team in that game. Geno was trying to give you the game there, but it was a hard fought game. That was a well-coached Raiders team that was sunk by more of a singular player than anything. But yeah, so if you're just looking from the outside, that looks bad. The Commanders, Jaden's back. They looked solid last week. You're going off of even what happened last year. It makes sense, but I think that the Bears are going to be able to move the ball in the air. I think the defense will play well enough. And I think in a way, this will be kind of like what the Lions game was for the Detroit Lions against the Bears, where, that was an emotional game that the Lions sat there and said, we're going to make a point, and they just trounced the Bears. I think that Ben Johnson, even though he wasn't here for the Fail Mary, he knows, like the entire league knows what happened that week. He knows, that was the start of the 10-game skid for the Bears. He's in that locker room with those guys, and, some of these players still talk about it. And Tyreek Stevenson certainly knows about it. He was on record saying that he knows he's going to have a conversation with his son one day about that play. Some of the other players feel that too. So this is, who are you as players? And that's what this is. This is the, are you here to make a statement game? And Ben Johnson's the kind of coach, whether it's him from himself, whether he picked it up a little bit from Dan Campbell, well, I don't really care, but I think he's the kind of coach that can get that out of you. So I'm taking the Bears. It'll be a little more high scoring than previously. I'll make it, but it'll be close. So I'll make it 30-27 Bears. Bengals at Packers. Packers are 14-point favorites here. I think 14 is just a big number. I know the Bengals traded for Joe Cool. Sometimes just having the different quarterback there is enough. Joe did beat the Bengals earlier this year, the one win that he was able to muster as the Browns quarterback. I'm not going to pick the Bengals to win, but I'll pick them to cover. There's my dying last words. Lions at Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 2.5. Even though, arguably, if you just asked 100 people right now who's the best team in the NFL is, a lot of teams or players, probably would be fans, whatever. People you ask would say the Lions, but they're picking the Chiefs. Now it's at Chiefs, so there's a little bit of the home bump here, so it's essentially a pick 'em. But I think that's a little disrespectful. I know the Chiefs are they're good. They're better than people are making them out to be. They did just lose to the Jaguars, but they're still a better team than people make them out to be. But I think there's just too much Lions disrespect. The Lions they really haven't missed a beat. There was that week 1 issue against the Packers, but ever since then, they've been on it. So I'm going to pick the Lions to cover and to win. The next Bears opponent is going to be the Saints. The Patriots are playing the Saints at New Orleans. Patriots favored by 3.5. Give me the Patriots. The Saints are not very good. Spencer Rattler is better than I thought he was. But that's not saying much because I didn't think almost anything of Spencer Rattler. This Patriots team showed they can hang with and beat the Bills, who some of those 100 people, a bunch of might say the Bills are the best team in the NFL right now. And so I just don't see how the Saints could pull this off. And 3.5 is a low enough number too, where I would hop on that. And then the opponent after that, the Bears will be playing the Ravens. This week, the Rams are at the Ravens. Rams favored by 7.5. As was expected all week, Lamar was ruled out. actually, to save my own curiosity, because a certain podcast host might have Kyle Hamilton in an IDP league. So that's important. Who else is out for this team? Chidobe Awuzie is not participating. Ben Cleveland not participating. Lamar Jackson was ruled out. Roquan Smith out as well. But it looks like Kyle Hamilton was a full participant. Yay for my fantasy team. But they're still missing a lot of bodies. And that team already was – they have a hard time stopping the run too. For whatever reason, that defense has no teeth right now. And without Lamar there, that offense is the same, kind of the same. So Rams here by 7.5. I don't know if I'd pick this game just because 7.5 is a weird number, but I would if I needed to, it'd be the Rams. All right. Very, very last bit, and then we're going to get out of here. A Cock 6 and Bull story. This is our play on Cock and Bull story, so a bold prediction. Defensively, Kyle Gordon gets a sack. I think he comes out. He's going to be pumped. He's going to be amped. A little birdie had told me that there was a chance he could have potentially gone to a couple weeks ago. It wouldn't have been, but like they wanted to be safe with the bye coming up and make sure that this is not an issue for the rest of the year. So, I think there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of want to that's being stored up right now. So, and that's the thing too. We just haven't gotten to see him. And I think seeing how Dennis Allen deploys him is going to be so interesting. Dennis Allen he is a good defensive coach. He is. I know, the run defense hasn't necessarily shown that, but he is a good defensive coach. So I think you can use him as a bit of a chess piece. Speaking of Kyle Hamilton, kind of how he is, or if you want to talk about Brian Branch over in Detroit, how he's used. So expect some interesting things with Kyle, with I almost said Kyle Hamilton, with Kyler Gordon. Offensively, bold prediction. Kyle Monangai gets a rushing touchdown. They're going to have the ball inside the 6-7 yard, and they're going to hand it to him, and he will actually gain the yards that are expected for him to be gained, unlike DeAndre Swift. So those are my 2 bold predictions. All right. Thanks, everyone, for who's here live for this special Friday episode of Bare Bones. This should be pretty much the same going forward in terms of like consistency now on Thursdays. So keep an eye out for that. There's going to be a couple here and there that I might just be doing solo because of falling on holidays. Like, so for example, we won't do a show like on Thanksgiving. I might pump something out like the day before or the day after kind of thing, just so is some content for that week's game. Same thing, I think for Christmas, like that falls on a Thursday. So there's a couple weird ones, but for the most part, Thursdays, the normal 5:30 time. Please, as I said, if you stuck around this long, if you're listening or watching on, other platforms, you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, head to YouTube, just give it a like, give it a comment, just say bear down, right? Comment your score prediction. It helps us out a ton, right? The more likes, the more views that are on there to the comments, helps the algorithm, helps it so we can be in more homes, one can say, for Bears fans. And then ultimately that lets us do more stuff for y'all. We want to do more stuff with y'all. And if you have ideas, I'd love to hear it. If you have a company you'd like to partner with and do a live show at your place, whether it's a bar, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's, a shoe shop, I don't really care. I'll do it anywhere. That sounds fun. Or if giveaways, if you want to get your name out here on the podcast, I'd love to partner with some of our fans. I just think, okay, we got one from Soup on Poop really quickly. I'll take a touchdown from Kyle. Let's go. #DeBears. I would take that too. We want to interact more with y'all, our listeners, because you are it sounds cheesy, but you're the backbone of this podcast. You're the backbone of Second City Gridiron. And, we do this stuff for you. As fun as it is for me to do this, I do it because I know a lot of y'all want this content. So help us help you. All right, everyone. Bear down.